born naturally dazed, living every day as if I were tipsy. So when Adrian Blake forced his way into my life, I thought he was only playing with me. Every time I failed to run away, and he caught me again, I gave him a thumbs up. Your hide and seek skills are improving fast. I only hid for half an hour, and you already found me. And just like that, I muddled through 3 years of a game where I ran and he chased. Until today I found out I was pregnant after nausea and vomiting. And I took the report home, wanting to tell Adrian Blake, whom doctors had diagnosed as infertile. But then he got into a car accident and lost his memory. His childhood sweetheart cried as she blamed me. If he had not rushed back to celebrate your birthday, none of this would have happened. He has forgotten you completely. I am begging you, stop clinging to him, okay? I slowly walked away for a while, my lower belly aching faintly. I had the feeling I had forgotten something. Forget it. I would think of it when I remembered. I stood under the streetlight for a while and scratched my head. Then I remembered. I turned around, went back and pushed the door open. I poked my head inside and held out my wrist, revealing the silver gray tracker on it. I left in too much of a hurry and forgot this. Can you help me take it off? Vanessa Hale raised an eyebrow and hesitated. What is that? I explained calmly. A tracker. It is paired with the one on Adrian Blake's wrist. If you want me to stop showing up in front of him, help me unlock this bracelet first. He was the one who had insisted I wear this tracker. I had thought it was harmless. It was not as if I had ever planned to run somewhere. He could not find me. But things were different now. He had forgotten me. Mr. and Mrs. Blake's expressions changed slightly. They exchanged a look. Vanessa clenched her fingertips and looked at the assistant. Did you know about this? Adrian's assistant looked troubled and stammered. Mr. Blake ordered that this bracelet could never be taken off for the rest of her life, so no one ever considered a removal plan. If it is removed by force, it will break. Mr. Blake slammed his hand onto the table, his voice thinking this is absurd. A grown man doing something like this. If word gets out, what will people think? He turned to the assistant. Call someone to remove it now. A specialist arrived quickly and simply cut it open with pliers. Vanessa took the 2 bracelets and tossed them into the trash. There you can go. I had just reached the door when a hoarse murmur came from behind me. No, do not go. My steps paused and I looked back on hospital bed. Adrian's eyes were closed, his brows tightly furrowed. Vanessa stepped forward and grabbed his hand. Adrian, I am here. Do not be afraid. As she spoke, she turned and shot me a look. Leave now, Mr. and Mrs. Blake stood on either side of me and escorted me out of the room. Once we were outside, Mr. Blake handed me a check. The Blake family will not shortchange you on what you are owed. But Adrian and you do not belong in the same world. His wife can only be Vanessa. We will choose a child from an adoption agency and have Adrian and Vanessa raise him together. Every trace of your existence will be erased from now on. This has nothing to do with you. Only when I reached the airport did the sadness come slowly, belatedly rushing up inside me. Adrian used to always say I was silly. Actually, I was not silly. I was just a bit slower than other people. But now he was the truly silly one. His brain had been damaged in the crash. I crouched in front of the boarding gate and dry heaved for a long time. When I straightened and wiped the corner of my mouth, I finally remembered. Oh no, I forgot to tell them I was pregnant. The doctor had misdiagnosed him. Adrian could have children after all. They did not need to adopt an heir. I pulled out my phone and tried to call them. But no matter what I did, the call would not go through. It seemed they really wanted nothing to do with me anymore. Still, they had given me so much money. I could raise the child alone. I soon settled down in a new city. My belly grew day by day. When it was time to give birth, I called an ambulance by myself. I raised my child well, but he looked too much like Adrian. His eyes, his nose bridge, even the curve of his lips. When he pressed them together, it was like they had been cut from the same mold. His personality was similar, too. When he fell, he did not cry. He climbed up by himself and patted his knees, looking solemn and precocious, exactly like that father of his. Soon it was open day at his preschool. Other children had their fathers and mothers sitting beside them. Only the seat next to me was empty. A little kid ran over and asked him, Owen, why did your dad not come? I opened my mouth, but my mind went blank for a beat. Slow and clumsy, I did not know how to answer. He left to his face and said very seriously, It is enough that Mom came. I can take care of Mom by myself. I do not need a dad. Several parents nearby laughed when they heard him. This child is so sensible. One parent looked at him a few more times, then suddenly made a sound of surprise. Why does this kid look more and more familiar? He tilted his head and studied Owen for a while, before slapping his thigh. I remember now he is practically a smaller version of my boss. But our boss and his wife are very loving. He did not want his wife to suffer through pregnancy, so they even adopted their child. I froze where I stood, my mind slowly processing the meaning of those words. Several parents exchanged glances, their eyes circling over me. A little boy suddenly laughed and pointed at Owen. Then aren't you a bastard? Your mom is dirty. She is the other woman that rich boss keeps outside. No wonder your dad did not come. You are an illegitimate child. An adult beside him tugged him back, but there was a meaningful smile at the corner of his mouth. Owen's small shoulders trembled. He clenched his fists and lunged forward. Do not talk about my mom. By the time I came back to my senses, he was already sitting on top of the other boy. The child's father rushed over and lifted Owen up. The little boy seized the chance to scratch him, leaving a long, bloody mark across Owen's cheek. The man glanced at me, seeing that I was raising a child alone. He decided I was easy to bully. He held Owen up and sneered, since this child has no father to discipline him, I will do it for his dad. Then he raised his hand and slapped Owen's backside. Owen's eyes reddened, but he bit his lip hard and refused to let his tears fall. My head buzzed. I rushed forward like a mad woman, snatched my child back, held him in my arms, and turned to leave. But in the middle of the night, Owen developed a fever. His little face burned red, and even the breath coming from him was hot. I carried him on my back and ran all the way to the emergency room. The hallway was packed with people. After registering, I held my burning child and curled up on a chair. Helplessness rose over me in waves. That moment, a faint murmur came from my arms, "Daddy, Daddy." I held him in silence for a moment, tightened my arms around him, and pressed my cheek against his hair. Your dad does not remember us. He went to be someone else's dad. The intercom called our number just then. I quickly stood up with Owen in my arms and hurried toward the exam room. Just as I reached the door, a woman suddenly squeezed in from the side and rushed ahead of me. My child scraped his hand. Let us go first. The moment our eyes met, both of us froze. It was Vanessa Hale. Her eyes fell on the child in my arms. She frowned, her tone turning uncertain. Why does this child look so much like impossible? The doctor said. Adrian cannot have children at all. I looked sincere and was about to say that was a misdiagnosis. Then steady footsteps came from behind her. Adrian Blake stepped to Vanessa's side. What is wrong? The moment I looked up, I met Adrian's dark, deep eyes. For some reason, the back of my neck went cold. A vicious flicker passed through Vanessa's eyes. Before I could speak, she softened her voice and turned toward him. Adrian, you forgot. But she is the one who used to bully me all the time. She even threatened me just now. She said she would not let me live peacefully. She shrank into Adrian's arms, her fingers tugging lightly at the hem of his jacket. I am scared. Teach her a lesson for me. Have her sent out of the country, okay? Adrian let go of Vanessa and lowered his eyes to look at her. His tone gave nothing away. She bullied you. Then he released Vanessa's hand and walked toward me. Step by step, I backed away. His gaze burned, and his voice carried a faint hoarseness. What is your name? My heart jumped under his stare. Lily Parker. It felt so familiar. Every time he came to catch me, he had that same fanatic look in his eyes. After a while, he lifted his chin toward the nurse. Let her see the doctor first. The child has a high fever. Behind him, Vanessa nearly ground her teeth to pieces, glaring at me with hatred. Fortunately, Owen was fine. After the 4-drip, we could go home. As I walked, I thought about everything that had happened today. I had to move to another city. I could not stay here anymore. I was still wondering where I should go, when an arm suddenly reached from behind and covered my mouth and nose. I lost consciousness in an instant. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a pitch-black little room. Adrian's clear, cold voice scraped past my ear. Lily Parker, be good and become my woman. I can give you everything you want. You are not allowed to run. Moved my hands and feet in the faint clinking of metal. I looked down at the cuffs and shackles locked around me. Familiar behavior, familiar lines, familiar Adrian. People say you cannot step into the same river twice, but Adrian could. For a moment, I was in a daze. I almost thought I had gone back in time. Why did it take you so long to find me this time? I did not know which part of that sentence had struck him. His pupils shrank violently. He raised a hand and pressed hard against his temple. His whole body swayed. The next second, he collapsed straight toward me. At that moment, the door was violently pushed open. Vanessa stood at the very front. Behind her were Mr. and Mrs. Blake. Vanessa's gaze passed over everything and landed on my shackled wrists and ankles. Her whole body swayed. Mrs. Blake clutched the door frame and almost fainted. Lily Parker, why is it you again? How did the two of you end up together again? The room was so quiet that the heavy, uneven rattling of Adrian's breath sounded like dry leaves scraping across concrete. He lay slumped against Lily, his forehead pressed into the crook of her neck. He was broad-shouldered and solid, his dead weight pinning her against the damp brick wall of the windowless room. The smell of him, rain, expensive cedarwood, and the faint, bitter tang of hospital antiseptic filled her senses. It was a familiar smell, one that had lingered in the corners of her mind for 3 years. Like an old song she couldn't quite name. Adrian, Lily whispered, her voice small and slightly muffled by his shoulder. You're squishing me. He didn't move. His hand, still cold from the outside air, remained clamped tightly around her wrist right above the heavy steel cuff. At the doorway, the silence shattered. Vanessa Hale let out a sharp, choked breath that sounded like she had been slapped. Her fingers, manicured to perfection in a pale, delicate pink, clawed at the doorframe. Behind her, Mr. and Mrs. Blake stood like two statues carved from ice, their faces pale under the flickering yellow bulb of the hallway. Adrian, Vanessa shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch that made Lily's ears ring. She lunged forward, her high heels clicking frantically on the bare concrete floor. What did you do to him? What did you do to my Adrian? She grabbed Adrian's shoulder, trying to pull him off Lily, but he was too heavy. When she couldn't budge him, she turned her glare onto Lily, her eyes wide, bloodshot, and glittering with a frantic, desperate hatred. You did this, Vanessa spat, her voice trembling. You took him. You locked him up in this horrible place. You've always been a monster, Lily Parker. You couldn't let him go, could you? Lily blinked. She looked down at her own wrists, where the thick iron cuffs, chain-linked to the floor anchor, rattled softly. Then she looked at the heavy lock holding her ankles together. I didn't lock anyone, Lily said, her tone mild and slow, as if she were explaining the weather to a very young child. He locked me. He had the keys. I think they're in his right pocket. Or maybe his left. He usually keeps them in his left because he's right-handed and likes to keep his dominant hand free to grab me. Shut up. Shut up. Vanessa screamed, her hands shaking as she began to pat down Adrian's jacket. Mrs. Blake stepped into the room, her elegant pearl necklace rising and falling rapidly against her collarbone. Her eyes swept over the chains, the bare concrete, and the small, rusted cot in the corner. Her face went from pale to a mottled, angry red. This is madness, Mrs. Blake whispered, her voice shaking with disgust. He is a Blake, the head of the Blake Group. If the media gets hold of this, if anyone sees him like this. She turned her sharp, accusing gaze toward her husband. Richard, do something. Get him off her. Mr. Blake, a stern man whose hair had gone entirely silver over the last 3 years, stepped forward. He didn't look at Lily. To him, she was an invisible, inconvenient stain on their family's pristine history. He grabbed Adrian under the arms and pulled. With Vanessa's help, they managed to drag Adrian's limp body away from Lily, letting him slide onto the dirty floor. The loss of his weight made Lily feel suddenly cold. She shifted her legs, the iron chains clinking in the quiet room. The key, Lily reminded them gently, pointing a finger at Adrian's trousers. The left pocket. If you don't take these off, I can't go check on Owen. He still has a fever. You still have the nerve to care about that bastard child? Vanessa hissed, finally pulling a heavy, old-fashioned brass key from Adrian's pocket. Her fingers were shaking so violently she could barely insert it into the padlock on Lily's wrists. He isn't Adrian's. Adrian can't have children. You brought a random child to the hospital just to scheme your way back into his life. Clack. The wrist cuffs fell away, leaving deep, red indentations on Lily's pale skin. Lily didn't rub them. She simply held out her ankles. The doctor made a mistake back then, Lily said, her voice soft and patient. I tried to call you to tell you, but my phone wouldn't go through. I think you blocked me. The check you gave me was very large, though. Thank you for that. It bought a lot of baby formula. Silence. Mr. Blake roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Not another word about this child. Adrian is married to Vanessa. They have a son, a proper legal heir. We do not need your lies.
Clack.
The ankle cuffs fell away. Lily stood up, her legs a little stiff. She shook out her skirt, which was dusty from the floor. She didn't look at the Blakes, nor did she look at Vanessa, who was now cradling Adrian's head in her lap, weeping loudly and calling his name. Instead, Lily walked straight toward the door. Where do you think you're going? Mrs. Blake demanded, stepping in front of her. To the hospital, Lily said, her eyes wide and honest. Owen is sleeping in the ward, but the nurse said his fever might spike again at midnight. I need to be there to cool his forehead with a wet towel. You are not going anywhere near that hospital, Mrs. Blake said, her voice dropping to a harsh, threatening whisper. We are moving Adrian to a private clinic immediately. As for you, you will take your child and leave the city tonight. If I see your face near my son again, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life in a place much worse than this room. Lily looked at Mrs. Blake's perfectly styled hair, then down at the expensive leather shoes she wore. Then she looked past her, at Adrian, who was beginning to stir on the floor. His eyelids fluttered, a deep groan escaping his lips as his hand twitched, searching the empty air. Lily, he muttered, his voice thick and broken. Don't run.
See?
Lily said to Mrs. Blake, pointing at Adrian. He's still playing.
But I
really don't have time today. Tell him I'll give him a thumbs up next time. Before Mrs. Blake could process the sheer, dazed absurdity of Lily's words, Lily slipped past her. She was surprisingly quick when she wanted to be, like a shadow, fading into the night. By the time Mr. Blake called out for the bodyguards, outside, the hallway was empty. The hospital at 3 in the morning was a landscape of pale blue light and the low, rhythmic hum of ventilation. Lily walked down the corridor of the pediatric wing, her flat shoes making no sound against the linoleum. When she reached Ward 402, she pushed the door open. Quietly, the room was warm. On the small bed, Owen was curled into a tight ball under the white blanket. His cheeks were still slightly flushed, but his breathing had slowed, even and deep. The nurse had left a small basin of warm water and a clean cloth on the bedside table. Lily sat on the edge of the bed. She dipped the cloth into the water, wrung it out until it was just damp, and gently folded it over Owen's forehead. The boy stirred. His long eyelashes, so like Adrian's, fluttered open.
For a
5-year-old, his eyes held a strange, quiet gravity that always made Lily feel a little guilty. Other children cried when they were sick. Owen only watched her with those dark, serious eyes. Mom, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Where did you go? I went to play hide and seek, Lily said, smoothing his hair back. But the other player fell asleep, so I came back. Owen frowned slightly, his small hand reaching out to touch the red, raw marks on Lily's wrists. Did he hurt you? No, Lily said, shaking her head. It was just a bit tight, like the bracelets we used to make out of willow branches, remember? Only heavier. The scary uncle from earlier, Owen said, his voice tightening. He looked like
me.
The people in the preschool said, I don't have a dad. But he looks like me. Is he the one who made you cry 3 years ago? Lily paused. Her mind, usually slow and uncluttered, drifted back to the airport.
3 years ago.
The smell of aviation fuel, the cold wind, the dry heaving in, the bathroom, and the heavy, metallic weight of the realization that she was entirely alone. He didn't make me cry, Lily said softly. I just forgot to tell him something important. And then he forgot me. When people forget things, they get confused. It's like when you lose your favorite toy. You look everywhere, but you don't remember where you put it, so you get angry. I don't get angry, Owen said, pulling the blanket tighter around his shoulders. I just buy a new one. Lily smiled, her fingers gently tapping his nose. That's because you're smarter than your dad. The door to the ward clicked. Lily didn't turn around immediately. She was slow to react, as always. But the sudden drop in temperature in the room was unmistakable. So this is where you hid, a voice said. It wasn't Adrian. It was Vanessa. She stood in the doorway, her coat thrown hastily over her shoulders. Her face was pale, devoid of the perfect makeup she had worn earlier. Behind her stood 2 large men in dark suits, the Blake family's personal security. Get the child, Vanessa said cold-bloodedly, pointing at the bed. Lily stood up instantly, her body moving faster than her mind. She blocked the bed, her arms spread wide. He is sick. His fever hasn't fully gone down yet. I don't care if he's dying, Vanessa hissed, her voice a venomous whisper to avoid waking the other patients down the hall. He is a threat. As long as he exists, Adrian will eventually look at him and realize the truth. Adrian's memory is fractured, but his instinct is returning.
Do you know what he did when?
He woke up in that room. Lily didn't answer. She only stared at Vanessa with her wide, dazed eyes. He nearly choked his own father, Vanessa whispered, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. He didn't recognize us. He only kept asking, where is Lily? Where did she go? He thought we hid you.
If he finds out about this.
Boy, if he realizes he has a biological son. Vanessa took a step closer, her fingernails digging into the leather of her handbag. The Blake family gave you $5 million 3 years ago. You should have stayed dead, Lily. But you came back. You brought this mistake with you. Owen is not a mistake, Lily said. Her voice wasn't loud, but for the first time, the foggy, dreamlike quality in her eyes cleared, replaced by something cold and solid. He is very polite. He doesn't even complain when he gets shots. Take them, Vanessa ordered the men. Take them to the warehouse in the Southern District. We will handle them before Adrian's fever breaks. The 2 men stepped forward. One of them reached for Lily's arm, while the other moved toward the bed where Owen was sitting up, his small fists clenched, his eyes wide with a cold, unchildlike anger. Stop! A deep, rasping voice echoed from the doorway. The security guards froze. In the doorway stood Adrian. He was still wearing his crumpled suit jacket, but his tie was gone, and the collar of his white shirt was torn open, revealing the sharp lines of his
Collarbone.
His face was deathly pale, sweat bead lining his forehead, and his eyes were bloodshot. A white bandage was wrapped hastily around his temple where he had injured himself during his collapse, a faint spot of red seeping through
The gauze.
but it was his eyes that made everyone in the room stop breathing. They weren't the distant, cold, polite eyes of the Mr. Blake who had lived for the past 3 years with Vanessa. They were dark, wild, and burning with a terrifying, singular focus, the look of a beast that had finally found the scent it had lost for years. Adrian, Vanessa gasped, her voice losing all its malice, replaced by a high-pitched, desperate panic. You should be in the clinic. The doctor said your concussion. Get out, Adrian said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of an iron door slamming shut. He didn't look at Vanessa. He didn't look at the security guards. His eyes were locked entirely on Lily, who stood by the bed, her hand still holding the damp cloth. Adrian, listen to me, Vanessa cried, running to him and grabbing his sleeve. She's trying to ruin us. She brought a fake child to extort money from the family. Your mother and father said. Adrian didn't say a word. He simply raised his arm, his grip like steel as he peeled Vanessa's fingers off his sleeve and shoved her aside. He didn't care if she stumbled. He didn't care about the tears springing to her eyes. He walked into the room. With every step he took, his eyes grew more intense. He stopped 2 feet away from Lily. His chest rose and fell heavily, his breath hot and ragged in the quiet ward. Lily Parker, he whispered. Yes, Lily said, her voice small. You're awake. Your head must hurt. You fell very hard earlier. Adrian's hand reached out, his fingers trembling slightly as they touched the side of her neck, right over the faint red mark where the metal collar had rested. You didn't run. I had to come back for Owen, Lily explained, pointing to the boy on the bed. He is our son. I forgot to tell you 3 years ago. The doctor, who said you couldn't have children, was very bad at his job. You should ask for a refund. Adrian's gaze slowly drifted down to the boy on the bed. Owen stared back at him. The 2 of them, one large, one small, looked at each other with identical, serious expressions. The curve of the nose, the shape of the jaw, the dark, intense depth of the eyes. It was like looking into a broken mirror that had suddenly fused back together. A sharp, agonizing pain flared behind Adrian's eyes. He gasped, grabbing his head with both hands, his body swaying. Adrian, Vanessa cried, trying to reach him again. Don't touch me, Adrian roared, his voice shaking the glass panes of the window. He glared at Vanessa, his memory a chaotic storm of flashing lights, the sound of a screeching car tire, the cold smell of rain, and a voice, her voice, telling him over and over again for 3 years, Lily is dead. Lily ran away with another man. You never loved her. You Adrian whispered, his eyes narrowing as he stared at Vanessa.
The
accident 3 years ago. The doctors, the memory suppression therapy. Vanessa's face drained of all color. She took a step back, her back hitting the
wall.
No. Adrian, I did it for you, the family we wanted to protect. You. Get out, Adrian said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Before I forget that you are a woman. The security guards, realizing the shift in power, immediately stepped back, refusing to interfere. They looked at Vanessa with pity, then bowed their heads, and retreated out of the room. Vanessa, realizing she had lost everything in a single night, let out a choked sob and ran out, the sound of her heels fading down the hallway like a dying heartbeat. The ward returned to silence. Adrian stood in the center of the room, his shoulders trembling. The pain in his head was still intense, a dull, throbbing ache that felt like iron nails being driven into his skull. But the fog that had wrapped around his brain for 3 years was finally breaking. He looked at Lily. She was still standing there looking slightly dazed, her fingers twisting the damp cloth. Why? Adrian asked, his voice cracked and raw. Why didn't you come find me? I tried, Lily said, her eyes blinking slowly. But your mother gave me a very big check. And they said you were married to Vanessa. And then I went to the airport and I felt sick and then I realized I was pregnant. I thought if you forgot me, it would be very troublesome to explain everything to you again. You were always so busy with meetings. Adrian let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He stepped forward, wrapping his arms around her waist, burying his face into her shoulder. He held her so tightly that Lily felt as if her ribs might crack, but she didn't push
Him away this time.
You're so slow, Adrian muttered against her skin, his tears hot and wet. You're so incredibly slow, Lily. I looked for you for 3 years.
In my
dreams, I was always looking for something, but I couldn't remember what it was. And you were just living in another city, raising my son, not saying a word. I was very busy, Lily said defensively, her hands hovering in the air before slowly coming down to pat his back. Owen is very difficult to raise. He doesn't like carrots. I had to hide them in the meatballs. It takes a lot of time. From the bed, Owen let out a small, dry cough. Mom, the boy said, his voice calm but demanding. He is crying. He is very loud. Adrian stiffened. He slowly let go of Lily and turned to look at his son.
He sat
on the edge of the bed, his large hand reaching out to touch Owen's small, warm forehead. The boy didn't shrink away, though he still looked suspicious. I am your father, Adrian said, his voice rough. I know, Owen said, looking at Adrian's bandage. You're the one who is bad at hide and seek. Mom said you're very slow. Adrian's lips twitched into a faint, painful smile. I'm not slow. She is the one who ran too fast. I didn't run, Lily corrected him, sitting down on the other side of the bed. I took the airplane. The ticket was quite expensive. The next morning, the sun rose over the city, casting a pale gold light through the hospital windows. The peace of the pediatric ward didn't last long. By 8 o'clock, the hallway outside was filled with the heavy footsteps of Adrian's personal assistants and lawyers. The Blake family's private medical team arrived, replacing the hospital staff under Adrian's strict orders. Mr. and Mrs. Blake arrived shortly after, their faces grim. They didn't enter the ward. Instead, they waited in the private lounge down the hall, demanding to see their son. Stay here with Owen, Adrian said to Lily, his voice returning to that cold, commanding tone he used for the rest of the world. He smoothed her hair, his fingers lingering on her cheek. I will handle them. Okay, Lily said, opening a little plastic container of apples she had bought from the hospital canteen. Don't be too loud. Owen is trying to watch cartoons. Adrian looked at her, his eyes softening for a brief second before he turned and walked out, his expression instantly freezing into ice as the door closed behind him. In the lounge, Mrs. Blake was pacing back and forth, her leather handbag clutched tightly in her hands. When Adrian walked in, she immediately took a step forward. Adrian, thank God you're all right. We've arranged for the best neurosurgeon from Switzerland to fly in. Save your money, Adrian said, sitting down on the single leather sofa.
He didn't invite them to sit.
He didn't even look at his father. The memory suppression therapy you paid for 3 years ago. Who was the doctor? Mr. Blake's face hardened. Adrian, we did what we had to do to protect the family. You were obsessed with that girl. You were neglecting the business. risking everything for someone who didn't even belong in our world. After the accident, when the doctor said you had temporary amnesia, we simply helped you move on. Help me move on? Adrian's voice was dangerously quiet. By forcing me into a marriage with a woman I couldn't stand? By making me adopt a child that wasn't mine to keep up appearances? Vanessa was the perfect wife for you, Mrs. Blake cried. She loved you.
She
Was willing to raise that child as your own. She is a liar, Adrian said, his eyes flashing with a cold, terrifying light. And so are you. You took 3 years of my life. You made me lose the birth of my son. You made Lily live in poverty, hiding from your threats. She isn't fit to be a Blake, Mrs. Blake argued, her voice rising in panic. She is simple. She doesn't understand our world. Adrian, if you marry her, the entire high society will laugh at us. Let them laugh, Adrian said. He stood up, his tall figure casting a long shadow over his parents. From today on, I am stepping down as the chairman of the Blake Group. Mr. Blake stood up, so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. What did
you say?
Are you mad? You would throw away the family empire for that girl? It's not a throwaway, Adrian said coldly. I've already transferred my personal shares to a private trust. The Blake Group can find another chairman. But if Vanessa or either of you comes within 10 miles of Lily or Owen again, I will liquidate those shares. You know what that will do to the company's stock. Mr. Blake's breath caught in his throat. He looked at his son, the boy he had raised to be a ruthless, calculated businessman, and realized that the monster he had created was now turning its teeth on his own family. You wouldn't, Mr. Blake whispered. Try me, Adrian said. He turned his back on them, walking toward the door. And tell Vanessa to sign the divorce papers by tonight. If she doesn't, the evidence of her embezzlement from the Hale family trust will be on the prosecutor's desk by tomorrow morning. A week later, the weather in the southern city turned warm and humid. Lily sat on a wooden bench in a small, quiet park near the hospital. The trees were lush and green, their leaves whispering in the afternoon breeze. Next to her, Owen was carefully building a tower out of small pebbles he had collected from the path. Mom, Owen said, not looking up. The giant is coming. Lily blinked, looking up from her book. Adrian was walking down the stone path. He was no longer wearing his expensive, custom-made suits. Today, he wore a simple black sweater and jeans, his hair slightly messy, the bandage on his temple replaced by a small, faint scar. He carried a large paper bag that smelled of fresh cinnamon buns. You found us, Lily said, giving him a thumbs up. We only hid for 20 minutes today. Adrian sat down next to her, his long legs stretching out. He pulled a warm bun from the bag and handed it to her, then gave a smaller one to Owen. I didn't need a tracker this time, Adrian said, his voice soft as he leaned over and kissed her cheek. I just followed the smell of sugar. The tracker was very heavy, Lily noted, taking a bite of the bun. My wrist still feels a bit light, but it's easier to wash my hands now. Adrian looked at her, his eyes deep and full of a quiet, complex emotion. He had given up his position, his family's wealth, and the grand title that everyone in the city fought for. He was no longer the untouchable Mr. Blake. But as he looked at Lily's dazed, peaceful face and his son's quiet, serious eyes, he felt a strange, solid warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt in 3 years. Lily, Adrian said, his fingers wrapping around hers, fitting perfectly into the spaces between her fingers. Are you still going to run? Lily chewed her bun slowly, her mind processing the question with its usual deliberate pace. She looked at the green trees, the small pebbles, and then at Adrian's face, which was no longer tight with anger or pain. Running is very tiring, Lily said honestly. And Owen is getting too heavy to
carry.
But if you're too slow next time, I might hide behind the big oak tree. Adrian smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He pulled her closer, his shoulder resting against hers, warm and solid. I won't be slow, he whispered into her hair. I'll always find you. Owen looked up from his pebbles, his small mouth covered in cinnamon sugar. I can hide better than Mom. You'll never find me. Adrian reached over and ruffled the boy's hair. We'll see about that, kid. And there, under the warm summer sun, the game of hide and seek that had lasted for 3 years finally came to a quiet, peaceful end. The transition from the high-powered executive suites of the Blake Group to a quiet life in a coastal city 300 miles away was not seamless, but for Lily, life remained largely the same. She was still slow, still dazed, and still spent her mornings watching the clouds change shape from the balcony of their new, modest three-bedroom apartment. To Adrian, however, the change was violent. The first month was a blur of legal battles. Though he had stepped down as chairman, his father did not let go easily. There were board meetings Adrian refused to attend, private investigators hired by Vanessa's family that his security detail had to quietly intercept, and a barrage of media speculation about the abrupt retirement of the city's most eligible bachelor. One Tuesday evening, the rain was tapping a steady rhythm against the glass. Lily was sitting on the living room rug, slowly folding Owen's small t-shirts into neat, slightly uneven squares. Adrian sat at the dining table, three laptops open before him, his fingers flying across the keys. His face was tense, the vein in his temple throbbing slightly under the faint scar. He was in the middle of a delicate restructuring of his private trust, the one asset his father couldn't touch. Adrian, Lily said, not looking up from a blue shirt. MH? He muttered, his eyes not leaving the screen. The laundry is very warm today. Do you want to hold a warm shirt? Adrian's fingers paused over the keyboard. He looked over at her. She was holding up a small, freshly dried shirt, her eyes wide and patient. The contrast between his chaotic, high-stakes digital war and her quiet, warm world was almost comical. He closed the laptops one by one. He walked over, sank onto the rug beside her, and took the small shirt. He didn't hold it. Instead, he pulled Lily into his lap, burying his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of lavender detergent and her skin. I'm tired, Lily, he whispered. Then sleep, Lily said, her small hand coming up to stroke his hair, her movements slow and rhythmic. The computers will still be there tomorrow. They don't have legs. They can't run away. My father is trying to freeze the trust's domestic assets, Adrian said, his voice muffled against her collarbone. He thinks if he starves me of funds, I'll go back. He thinks I can't live without the Blake name. Is the trust where the money is? Lily asked. Yes. How much is left? Even if he freezes the domestic accounts, the offshore funds are enough to buy this entire apartment complex 10 times over, Adrian said, a touch of his old, arrogant self returning to his voice. Lily nodded, satisfied. Then we have enough for carrots and meatballs. And Owen needs new shoes. His toes are sticking out of his blue ones. That's all we need. Adrian let out a soft laugh, his arms tightening around her. You really don't care about the grand villa? The private drivers? The jewelry? The villa had too many stairs, Lily said, her voice drifting as she recalled. The Blake mansion. Every time I hid, I had to climb 3 flights of stairs. It made my knees hurt. Here, there is only one hallway. It's much better. Adrian kissed the side of her neck, his chest rising and falling in a deep, peaceful sigh. You're right. One hallway is enough. The peace, however, was shattered the next morning. Owen's preschool was situated in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood 5 blocks from their apartment. It was a small, private establishment where the teachers were kind and didn't ask too many questions about why Owen's father looked like a man who belonged on the cover of financial magazines but spent his afternoons sitting on a wooden bench waiting for preschool to dismiss. At 3 p.m., Lily stood by the gate, her hands tucked into the pockets of her oversized yellow cardigan. Other mothers stood in small groups, whispering and laughing. Ever since Adrian had started showing up to pick up Owen, the atmosphere among the parents had changed. The sneers and whispers about illegitimate children and dirty secrets had vanished, replaced by a tense, polite curiosity. Some of the mothers tried to strike up conversations with Lily, but her slow, dazed responses usually left them confused and slightly awkward, so they eventually left her alone. Mom. Owen ran out of the glass doors, his small backpack bouncing against his shoulders. He didn't look like a typical 5-year-old. His face was serious, his step steady. Behind him, however, the teacher, Miss Miller, looked pale and anxious. Mrs. Parker, I mean Miss Hale. No, sorry, Miss Parker, Miss Miller stammered, running after Owen. There was a woman here earlier. She said she was Owen's aunt. She wanted to take him out early. Lily paused, her mind turning the words over. An aunt? Owen doesn't have an aunt. He only has me, his dad, and his grandparents who are very angry and live in a big house with too many stairs. She had a legal document, Miss Miller said, her hands trembling as she held out a piece of paper. She said she was Vanessa Hale. She claimed that the custody of the child was under dispute. Before Lily could take the paper, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up smoothly beside the curb. The door opened and Vanessa stepped out. She looked different. The manicured elegance was gone, replaced by a sharp, brittle thinness. Her eyes were dark-circled, her high-end designer clothes looking slightly loose on her frame. She looked like a woman who had been living on coffee and nerves for a month. "Lily," Vanessa said, her voice tight and high. Lily pulled Owen behind her, her body moving with that sudden, protective instinct that always surprised people. "Vanessa, you shouldn't be here. The school gate is for parents only. You don't have a child here." "I had a child," Vanessa said, her voice cracking as she took a step closer.
The
Two security guards who usually followed her were gone. She was alone.
the
"Child we adopted, the one your husband forced me to give back to the agency. Because he wanted to clear the slate. He was my son, Lily. I raised him for 2 years. But you adopted him to trick Adrian," Lily said, her voice honest and quiet. "That's what the assistant said. You wanted everyone to think Adrian could have children so his father wouldn't lose face. That's not very nice to the baby. What do you know about being nice?" Vanessa screamed, her face contorting with
rage.
Several parents nearby gasped and began pulling their children away.
You
"Took everything. My marriage, my status, my child. Adrian ruined my family's business last week. My father is facing bankruptcy, and it's all because of you." She reached into her coat pocket. Lily's eyes, usually slow to focus, caught the dull, metallic glint of a small paring knife. "If I can't have my life back," Vanessa whispered, her eyes wide and glassy, "then you don't get to have yours." She lunged. Lily didn't run. Her first thought was to cover Owen, so she threw herself over his small body, her yellow cardigan flaring out like a shield. But the blow never came. A heavy, dark figure intercepted Vanessa midair. Adrian had arrived, his face a mask of pure fury. He grabbed Vanessa's wrist, twisting it until the small knife clattered onto the asphalt. With a harsh shove, he sent her sprawling onto the
ground.
"Get away from them," Adrian roared, his voice shaking the leaves on the trees. Vanessa lay on the gravel, her hand clutching her wrist, her hair falling wild over her face. She looked up at Adrian, her eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic longing. "Adrian, please, we were together for 3 years. I took care of you when you couldn't remember your own name. How can you be so cruel?" "You didn't take care of me," Adrian said, his voice cold and flat as he stepped between her and Lily. "You kept me drugged. You and my parents' doctors. Every time I had a headache, every time I started to remember the color of Lily's hair, you gave me those vitamin pills. Do you think I haven't found the medical records?" Vanessa's breath hitched. "No, that was for your concussion?" "The police are already at your father's office," Adrian said, his phone already in his hand, his eyes showing no mercy. "And there is a patrol car on its way. Here. Attempted assault in a school zone. Let's see how your family's lawyers handle that." Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens began to echo through the streets. Vanessa didn't try to run. She sat on the curb, her face buried in her hands, weeping silently as the parents watched from a distance, whispering. Adrian didn't look at her again. He turned around, his hands shaking slightly as he knelt down in front of Lily and Owen. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice cracking as his hands swept over Lily's shoulders, her arms, her face. "Did she touch you?" "No," Lily said, her hand reaching out to touch his cheek. "You came very fast
Today.
Your hide and seek skills are really getting better. I didn't even have time to count to 10. Adrian let out a choked breath, leaning his forehead against hers. "I told you. I'm not letting you out of my sight again." Owen tapped Adrian's knee. "Dad, the police are here. Can we go buy ice cream?"
Now?
"The vanilla one with the rainbow sprinkles." Adrian looked at his son, then at Lily, and the tension in his shoulders finally melted away. "Yes, Owen. We can buy all the ice cream you want." The arrest of Vanessa Hale was the final thread that pulled the old world apart. With her family's business ruined and her own legal troubles mounting, the Hale family collapsed under the weight of their own debts. The Blakes, realizing that Adrian was truly prepared to destroy his own share value to protect Lily, finally retreated into the shadows. Mr. and Mrs. Blake left the country for a long-term medical vacation in Europe, leaving the Blake group under the management of a professional board of directors. The city became quiet. 2 months later, the small coastal town was filled with the scent of autumn. The leaves had turned a deep, burning orange, and the wind from the sea carried a crisp, salty chill. In the kitchen of their apartment, Lily was slowly stirring a pot of tomato
Soup.
The smell was rich and warm, filling the small space. Owen sat at the small dining table, carefully drawing a picture of a giant green dinosaur on a piece of white paper. Adrian walked in, his cheeks slightly pink from the outside cold.
He was
Carrying a small, wooden box. He set it on the table and walked over to Lily, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What is that?" Lily asked, her eyes on the soup. "A gift," Adrian said. Lily turned the stove off, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked over to the table. She opened the wooden box. Inside lay 2 silver-gray trackers. They were the same ones Vanessa had thrown into the trash 3 years ago, or rather exact replicas, beautifully polished, the metal shining under the kitchen light. Lily looked at them, then at Adrian, her face slightly confused. But Vanessa threw them away, and the specialist cut them with pliers. "I had them remade," Adrian said, taking one of the bracelets out. He took Lily's wrist, his fingers gentle as he clicked the lock. It fit perfectly, but this time it was loose, not tight enough to leave a mark. He then took the second bracelet and locked it around his own wrist. "Why?" Lily asked, her eyes blinking. "We don't need to play hide and seek anymore. You know where the apartment is. It's on the 3rd floor." Adrian smiled, his eyes deep and steady. He took her hand, his fingers interlocking with hers, the 2 silver bracelets clinking softly in the quiet
kitchen.
"It's not for chasing you," Adrian said softly. "It's so that if I ever get lost, again, if I ever forget my name or where I am, you can look at your wrist, press the button, and come find me." Lily looked at the silver bracelet on her wrist, then at the one on his.
The
Metal was cool, but his hand was warm. "Okay," Lily said, her voice soft and slow. "But I'm very slow. If you get lost, you have to stay in one place and wait for me. If you walk around, I might get confused and go buy a bun instead." Adrian laughed, his eyes bright with tears and joy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, his heart beating a steady, peaceful rhythm against hers. "I'll stay right where I am," he whispered. "I won't move an inch." From the table, Owen looked up from his drawing, his serious little face breaking into a rare, small smile. "Mom," the boy said, "the soup is getting cold." "Oh," Lily said, her eyes shifting to the stove. "I forgot to put the lid on." And with that, the small, dazed girl and her obsessive, intense boy sat down to eat, their silver bracelets catching the light of the setting sun, shining like 2 stars that had finally found their way back to the same sky.